Hi, this is Mark Clendon, and I'm here today from the state of Ohio, Bureau of Workers' Compensation. So this is a great topic for me. I'm here to represent junior achievement and discussing risk management as Bureau of Workers' Compensation. This is something we do all the time. We insure employees when they're at work at risk of getting hurt on the job. So this is pretty common for us. I've worked a long time in the insurance field, so I certainly know a good bit about the various types of insurance, whether it's life insurance, home insurance, car insurance, workers' compensation insurance, health insurance. I've been around all of that. So we'll get started, and we'll talk today about what's important about risk and what it really is. So let's get started. Risk management. What is risk management? How do we manage risks? How do we know what those risks are? How do we know which ones are more significant than others? Some of that takes time. Some of it is learning as you go, and some of it can be learned very early on in life. Let's warm up this activity a little bit, I guess, today, right? So we'll talk a little bit about risk, and risk very much at its basic is just the possibility of loss or physical harm. Risk that you could lose money on an investment, risk that you could lose your iPhone, risk that you could be injured. So all of those are risks, and along with those risks is risk management, which is the ability to manage those risks. We can't always do things that just avoid risk altogether. Sometimes we have to accept a certain amount of risk if we're trying to get somewhere. You can look back at investments, and some of the safest investments probably right now are federal tips or federal bonds or federal investments. Well, they also pay very little. So if you're looking at inflation, maybe that's hovering at 3%, and you're earning 1% on your money, that means that every year you're losing 2% on your money. And while it's safe and you've avoided risk, you've added a different level of risk, the risk that your money is going to dwindle because inflation is eating away at it. So, risk is really a challenge to find good balance in, right? There are unavoidable risks. If I go out and I dress properly, but there's a cold or a virus out there, and certainly, as we're going through this whole COVID-19 thing, you can be as healthy as you want to be, and you can take all the precautions you want to, but you can't always avoid all of the risks, and there are some unavoidable risks out there, and we need to accept those. We do everything we can, right? As far as COVID goes, we wear masks, we stay indoors, we don't get into large crowds, and we're trying to mitigate that risk, right? Trying to make it as small as possible. We know we can't get rid of it, but maybe we can make it as small as possible. And you have to take personal responsibility for that risk as well. And I think that's one of the more important parts. You look at this lady here who's riding a bike, and she's doing her best to avoid her risk, right, by wearing a helmet, and that's her way of mitigating some of that risk. So we talked about risk and the definition of what it is, right? It's the possibility of loss or physical harm. We talked about what risk management is, right? It's predicting or minimizing the chance of loss or harm, right? We're trying to minimize it. We know it's out there, but we're trying to find a way to reduce that risk on our side. We talked about the cold, right? I mean, I can do all the precautions I can, but I can't always prevent myself from having a cold. I do the best I can with what I have available, but I certainly can't completely avoid that outside of living maybe in a bubble, which I don't find too entertaining. So risks, we find that, pro sports players take risks all the time. They go out on the field, and if you take a baseball player, every time you stand behind that home plate and you're fielding balls, you're taking a risk. You have a risk of injury. But if you look at this baseball player, some of the things you find is that he's taken away some of that risk. He wears a really big, good glove. He's got another glove underneath that glove. I can see a mask over a catcher's mask over his face. I can look down on the left and I see knee pads in case the ball gets away and hits him in the leg. I see a chest protector. So he has taken a lot of precautions to try and take away all those risks. Could a ball still bounce off the plate and come underneath his chin and hit him underneath the chin? Certainly, but he's taken away all the risks that he possibly could take away from at that time. There are 4 types of risk managements. And before I get into them, I want to talk a little bit about, we talk about risk management. One of the more important parts of risk are personal responsibility. Personal responsibility for your choices, personal responsibility for your actions, personal responsibility for how those choices and actions affect others. It's the most important method of managing risk and preventing those financial losses from occurring. And I think it's important that we're aware of that, and that we always want to push that off on somebody, or that's kind of our first inclination. It wasn't my fault. I didn't know. But we need to take personal responsibility for the risks that we're involved in. By taking personal responsibility, we reduce our risk by taking that personal responsibility. From a personal financial risk standpoint, there are a lot of things that we could avoid. If we go to work on time all the time and we're not late, we're avoiding the possibility of getting fired because we're late all the time. We can control that risk. That's a personal responsibility. Being aware of your situation, where you are, what's going on, being aware of what's around you, really important. And avoidance, just trying to avoid dangerous and compromising situations that could put you in harm's way or put your finances in harm's way. You've got the personal responsibility. You've got the ability to make that choice. We talked about the risk management choices here, right? Avoidance, not doing the risk at all and completely avoiding it. Certainly a possibility for some things, but not certainly a possibility for all things. Let's see if I can make this a little smaller here. There you go. Control and reduction of risk, right? So we can control that risk a little bit. I think you saw that in that baseball player, right? He didn't avoid the risk. He actually went on the field, but he got dressed up in all his gear. So he was able to control and reduce the risk a little bit. Transfer of the risk, we find that oftentimes in insurance. We offload some of the financial costs of that risk to an insurance company. And then we have acceptance of risk. That's the amount of risk that we decide that we're going to go ahead and take anyways, and I think sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes maybe it's not, but we can't be sure of everything, right? So we talk about avoidance. Just staying out of a situation, not doing something. If there's a stock that's a high risk stock that poses a really good return, we may choose just to avoid that stock and stay away from it because we're not really willing to take on that risk. Control and reduction. I think I just gave you a really good example of control and reduction. Another one might be, I like to ride my bike on mountain trails, but I wear a helmet to control the amount of risk that I'm taking on. So if I fell, at least my head is more protected than not wearing a helmet at all. Transfer, and transfer at its base is insurance. What we're doing is we're using an insurance company to bond our risk off, to say, we're willing to pay you, I'm willing to pay my insurance company X number of dollars a year if they'll make sure that if my car gets damaged, they're going to pay for it. or they're going to pay for a portion of it, right? I don't want to take on all the risk of paying for my full car, but I'm willing to take on a little bit and transfer the rest of that risk onto my insurance carrier. And then the final one is acceptance of risk. And the acceptance of risk is really, if I've decided, we go back to that financial piece, I've decided that while I know this is a risky investment, I think the payoff is there, and I accept that risk, and I'm willing to go ahead and invest anyways. I've accepted that risk, and I've gone into it knowingly and willingly. So let's do a little risk game here, okay? So we'll see how we do it. All right, so let's figure out where these go. I'm going to buy travel insurance on a plane ticket. Well, the mere fact that it's insurance should tell you that I'm going to try and transfer some of that risk over to my insurance carrier. I'm going to borrow some money to start a business that could be profitable. Well, if I'm going to borrow money to start a business that could be profitable, but it could not be profitable, well, let's go with maybe acceptance. We'll think about that. Choosing not to start a business that could lose money. Well, certainly we know where that goes, right? I'm just going to avoid going into that business completely. And I'm going to install an an alarm system in my house to warn me in case something happens. I think that it can't prevent the risk, but I've controlled that risk a little bit. See how we do. Hey, how about that? Perfect. I knew we could do it. And together, I was absolutely positive we can get that done. From a strengthening standpoint, we're going to skip this piece on strengthening. However, I do want to talk about a little bit that are different types of risks out there, right? There are risks all over the place. We have risk in our finances, right? If we put money in places we shouldn't put it, or put it in too risky of a place, or we don't research the person we're putting the money with, then we give it to somebody who is not as honest as we like them to be. There is risk of assets, right? Our car was a good example. Our home is another example. Our cell phone. How many times do we insure our cell phone for X number of dollars a month, just in case we lose it or we drop it or we break it, and we can return it and get another one, and they'll pay the part of the cost. Well, what we did is we transferred some of that risk over to our cell phone carrier. One that we don't think about all the time is risk from a health standpoint. Our health insurance. We can buy health insurance and help offset the cost of our health care. We can also take personal responsibility. And I think that's where you started talking about this a little bit, right? I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to eat right. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to keep my weight down. I'm going to watch my sugar intake. I'm going to keep my health as good as possible. Does that mean that if I do everything I'm supposed to do, that I'll always be healthy? Well, no, it doesn't. So I picked up some insurance to make sure that I share that burden with somebody else. And I think it's important to understand that risk management is everywhere in our life. It's not just any one place. It's all over the place. Our risk management pantomime, we're going to kind of bounce over. I said we would already, and we're just limited on time, and we really don't have time to cruise through that. So we get to our sprint here, and we'll get to have a little fun with some risky trivia. I love trivia games. I'm sure you do too. So we'll go through the trivia and we'll see how we do here. I have a feeling that we're gonna hit it. We're gonna do a good job here. Ready? Let's go with number one. Car insurance is an example of which risk management strategy? Come on. Right, it's transfer. As soon as you see it's insurance, you know that we're trying to transfer it. What's the most important method for preventing financial loss? The most important method. I think I'm going to go with personal responsibility, because in the end, you've got to take responsibility for those actions, right? Come on. Number three, true or false? Avoiding a risk is always the best strategy. Well, you'd be first wanting to say true, but if you avoid all risks, you also don't get to pick up on all the opportunities. So there's some balance in there. So you have to take a little risk sometime. You can't just not take any risk. So I'm going to say that's false. And we're correct. And bonus round here, number 4, installing fire alarms and sprinkler systems is an example of which risk management strategy. Come on, we just saw that not too long ago. It wasn't avoidance, and it wasn't transfer. It was control and reduction, right? I've added something to help reduce the risk a little bit, so it's control and reduction. And it is, in fact, control and reduction. We knew that going into it, right? We got them all right, and I knew we would. Really, I knew we would. Okay. Here's our little recap for the day, and I really enjoyed the session with you, but I want to make sure when we walk away, we've understood a couple of things. When we talk about risks and risk management, the risk of financial loss is an everyday reality for everyone, whether you have a lot of money or a little money, a little bit of knowledge or a lot of knowledge. Financial loss is an everyday reality, and we have to manage it every day. The 4 main risk management strategies are avoidance, don't do it at all; control it, put something in place to reduce it a little bit, like a helmet; transfer it through insurance, let's go buy some car insurance; and acceptance, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to invest anyway. Sorry. Personal responsibility is the most important method of preventing financial loss, and I think that's true. At the end of the day, you are your own person, and you're the one that has to make the choice for your personal wealth and health. And those choices you make are your responsibility. Own them, accept them. If they're good ones, accept them. If they're bad ones, accept them, and learn from that and move on. Okay. I hope you had a good session with me today. Look forward to the feedback, and we'll see you in the next session. Thanks so much for attending.